Start with our golden macaroni made from special durum wheat. Boil for 7 minutes.
While flour was scarce and sugar carefully rationed, another quiet battle unfolded in kitchens from Maine to California. In the years after the Great Depression and through wartime, Betty Crocker's regional dishes became America's secret weapon. 30 timeless recipes that turned scraps into feasts and strangers into neighbors. Wait until you see number 18. It's still ladled by the gallon at county fairs today. Chicken and Dumplings. What if I told you that one steaming bowl could mend both hunger and heartbreak? Step into a 1942 Alabama kitchen where steam rises from a cast-iron pot and hope floats on fluffy clouds of flour. On paper, it's Sunday dinner. In practice, it's survival wrapped in comfort. A whole chicken cut into pieces, flour, salt, pepper, onion, and that magical dumpling dough made from precious rationed flour mixed with just enough milk to bind dreams together. You'd simmer that bird until it surrendered its essence to the broth, then drop spoonfuls of dumpling batter across the surface like little life preservers. What makes it sing is those final 15 minutes when flour transformed into pillowy clouds that soaked up every drop of golden comfort. Lobster Roll. Could something so elegant really spring from fishermen's lunch pails? Picture the weathered docks of Bar Harbor in 1947, where fishing boats bobbed like corks, and the day's catch meant the difference between prosperity and poverty. This wasn't just using leftovers. This was New England's crown jewel born from practicality. Fresh lobster meat, picked clean from shells, mixed with just enough mayonnaise to bind. You'd toss that sweet meat gently with the mayonnaise, pile it high into that warm roll, and serve it alongside chips and a pickle. Cold, sweet lobster against a warm, butter-toasted split-top roll. That contrast is the whole point. Worth their weight in gold, these rolls could sell for decent money when a full dinner cost less, making them the luxury meal that working families saved up for all week. Local papers in the early 1940s called them "Summer on a Roll," after tourists began driving hundreds of miles just for one bite. Today, you'll spend about $30 to $40 for this same seaside luxury at established seafood houses, but back then, it was how fishing families hot brown. Who would believe that a midnight snack could become a regional treasure? Transport yourself to Louisville's Brown Hotel in 1926, where Chef Fred Schmidt faced a kitchen crisis. Hungry guests and mostly empty larders after a long evening dance. This open-faced marvel wasn't born from abundance, but from necessity. Sliced turkey, thick Texas toast, a rich Mornay sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and cheese, crispy bacon strips, and fresh tomato slices arranged like edible artwork. You'd layer that turkey over toasted bread, smother it in bubbling cheese sauce, top with bacon and tomatoes, then broil until golden and irresistible. Heat did the rest when that cheese sauce hit the hot broiler, creating a golden crust that cracked to reveal molten comfort beneath. Its trick was how this dish proved that sometimes the best innovations come from desperation and determination. Local papers in the early 1950s dubbed it the sandwich that broke all the rules. After restaurant imitation attempts sparked nationwide attention. Pasties. What kept a man alive 300 feet underground where darkness never lifted? Step into Michigan's Upper Peninsula, circa 1880, where Finnish and Cornish miners carried their survival wrapped in pastry, like edible insurance policies. These hand pies weren't just lunch. They were lifelines in a world where coming home wasn't guaranteed. Diced beef, potatoes, rutabaga, onions, salt, pepper, and a sturdy pastry crust that could survive a 12-hour shift in rough conditions. You'd roll that dough thick enough to protect precious contents, fill one half with seasoned vegetables and meat, fold it over like a letter to loved ones, and crimp those edges tight enough to seal in flavor and hope. The turn comes here. These portable dinners stayed warm for hours thanks to thick crust insulation, providing hot comfort in cold, dangerous places where warmth meant everything. Some families tucked a sweet bite, jam or apple, into one end, though accounts differ on how common this practice was. Contemporary press in the early 1890s reported that a good pasty can sustain a man through the hardest day's work underground and remind him of home's warmth. Today, you'll spend about $15 to $20 for this same hearty comfort at legitimate Michigan pasty shops, but back then they cost very little and meant the difference between energy and exhaustion. That flaky crust yielding to tender filling created satisfaction that sustained both body and spirit through America's toughest jobs. Brunswick Stew. How do you feed an entire community when everyone's struggling to make ends meet? Chicken, pork, beef if available, lima beans, corn kernels, tomatoes, onions, potatoes, and whatever vegetables generous neighbors could contribute to the common pot. You'd brown the meats in that enormous pot, add vegetables in careful layers, pour in enough water and seasonings to create a thick, hearty stew that could satisfy dozens of hungry families. Heat did the rest during those long hours of slow simmering when individual ingredients surrendered their identity to become something greater than the sum of their parts. What makes it sing is how this dish made rations feel like plenty. One pot could feed 50 people when everyone contributed just a little something to the mix. Hush Puppies. What silenced barking dogs and became the South's most beloved side dish? Cornmeal, flour, eggs, buttermilk, onions, salt, baking powder, and just enough seasoning to make ordinary ingredients sing with flavor. You'd mix that batter until just combined, heat oil until it shimmered with possibility, then drop spoonfuls of hope into bubbling fat, where they'd transform into crispy golden perfection. Its trick was in the temperature. Oil hot enough to create an immediate crust, while keeping the inside tender and fluffy like edible clouds. It jumped from home tables to fairs when these simple fritters became so popular that fish fries weren't complete without them, turning a kitchen accident into a beloved tradition. Contemporary press in the late 1840s noted that these curious cornmeal spheres have become as essential to a proper fish fry as the fish themselves. Today you'll spend about $8 to $12 for a basket of these same golden treasures at renowned southern seafood houses, but back then they cost practically nothing and used up cornmeal that might otherwise go stale. Tamale Pie. What happens when Mexican tradition meets American ingenuity in frontier kitchens? Ground beef, onions, chili powder, cumin, tomatoes, corn kernels, cornmeal, milk, eggs, and cheese combined to create layers of comfort that could fill the biggest appetites. You'd brown that meat with onions and spices until the kitchen filled with aromas that could call cowboys home from miles away, spread the mixture in a baking dish, then top it with thick cornbread batter that baked into golden perfection. What makes it sing is the construction. The cornbread absorbed flavors from below while creating a protective crust that kept everything moist and delicious. These frontier families created a dish that honored Mexican workers who taught them about chili peppers and cumin while adapting it to available ingredients and American ovens. Local papers in the early 1920s reported that this ingenious combination has become as popular in ranch kitchens as beans and bacon after county fair cooking contests sparked widespread adoption. Today you'll pay about $20 to $25 for this same southwestern comfort at trendy Tex-Mex restaurants, but back then it was under $1 and could feed 8 people while using just 1 pound of meat. Green Chile Stew. How do you turn local abundance into liquid comfort that warms both body and soul? Pork shoulder, potatoes, onions, fresh roasted green chilies, garlic, cumin, oregano, and enough love to balance the heat with comfort that satisfied even the most demanding palates. You'd char those chilies over open flame until their skins blistered and peeled away like old paint. revealing the sweet, smoky flesh underneath that would transform ordinary stew into something magical. Its trick was in the roasting properly. Charred chilies developed complex flavors that no amount of seasoning could replicate, creating depth that made each spoonful a revelation. Spoon bread. Could something between bread and pudding really satisfy like a full meal? Cornmeal, milk, eggs, butter, salt, baking powder, and just enough sugar to balance the corn's natural earthiness into something that satisfied both hunger and the desire for something special. You'd cook that cornmeal with milk until it thickened like creamy porridge, beat in eggs and butter until the mixture became silky and golden, then bake it until it puffed up like hope itself. Lefse wrap. Sandwiches. What happens when Norwegian tradition meets American sandwich innovation? These weren't just sandwiches. They were edible bridges between past and future, wrapped in tender potato goodness. Potatoes, flour, milk, butter, salt, and whatever filling ingredients families could gather. That tender, slightly sweet potato flavor created the perfect backdrop for both simple and elaborate fillings while honoring traditions that connected families to their heritage. Then came Cincinnati's unique creation. Goetta. Who would think that stretching sausage with oats could create a breakfast masterpiece? Step into 1850s Cincinnati, where German immigrants faced American abundance but old-world thrift, creating something that satisfied both tradition and necessity. On paper, it's breakfast. In practice, it's cultural adaptation served hot from the skillet with crackling edges and tender centers, ground pork, beef, steel-cut oats, onions, bay leaves, sage, salt, pepper, and enough time for patience to transform simple ingredients into something that became Queen City tradition. You'd simmer that meat mixture with oats for hours until everything melded into a cohesive mass. Pour it into loaf pans to set overnight, then slice and fry each piece until crispy outside and creamy within. The turn comes here. Time allowed flavors to marry and textures to develop, creating a product that sliced clean but cooked up creamy and satisfying. This economical creation stretched expensive meat with cheap oats while creating flavors that were entirely new yet comfortingly familiar to German palates, adapting to American kitchens. Contemporary press in the 1870s reported that this curious breakfast creation has spread beyond German neighborhoods to grace tables throughout the city, after local butchers began selling pre-made versions. Today, you'll pay about $12 to $18 for this same Cincinnati comfort at authentic German-American restaurants, but back then it was very affordable and could provide breakfasts for a week. That crispy, savory exterior giving way to tender, seasoned interior created satisfaction that powered workers through long days while honoring traditions that connected families to their roots. Meanwhile, Wisconsin was creating community magic. Booyah Stew. How do you feed 500 people with just one pot and a prayer? Transport yourself to a 1920s Wisconsin churchyard where Belgian-American families discovered that community cooking could create miracles when everyone contributed what they could spare. This wasn't just a meal. This was social glue disguised as Sunday dinner, bringing neighbors together through shared labor and abundant results. Chicken, beef, pork, carrots, celery, onions, cabbage, green beans, potatoes, and whatever vegetables generous souls brought from their gardens to add to the communal pot. You'd start this massive undertaking before dawn, browning meats in enormous cauldrons, adding vegetables in careful succession, stirring with oars instead of spoons, while stories and laughter seasoned everything better than salt. Heat did the rest over 12 hours of patient cooking when individual contributions merged into something greater than anyone could create alone. Liquid community that satisfied both hunger and the human need for connection. Volunteers stirred with oars. The pot did what a town meeting couldn't, feed everyone at once. Contemporary press in the mid-1920s wrote that Booyah cooking has become our community's greatest equalizer. Rich and poor, old and young, all stirring the same pot after witnessing church fundraisers that raised enough money to build new schools. Today, you'll spend about $15 to $20 for a bowl of this same community comfort at Wisconsin's supper clubs and festivals. But back then, it cost whatever folks could contribute and created bonds that lasted generations. That rich, complex flavor developed through hours of communal cooking created satisfaction that fed both body and spirit, while proving that sharing multiplies blessings rather than dividing them. Across the South, rice country was creating something special. Chicken Bog. What transforms leftover rice into liquid comfort that satisfies like a warm hug? Journey to South Carolina's Low Country in 1890, where rice plantation families learned to turn their abundant grain into something that could stretch a chicken across multiple meals while creating flavors that lingered in memory. On paper, it's using leftovers. In practice, it's alchemy that transformed simple ingredients into something that became a regional treasure worth celebrating. Chicken, rice, smoked sausage, onions, celery, chicken broth, salt, pepper, and just enough liquid to create that signature boggy consistency that gave this dish its distinctive name and character. You'd simmer that chicken until it fell off the bone, remove and shred the meat, then cook rice in the flavorful broth with vegetables until it achieved that perfect creamy texture somewhere between soup and risotto. What makes it sing is the consistency. Not quite soup, not quite pilaf, but something uniquely satisfying that absorbed every drop of chicken essence while maintaining enough body to stick to your ribs. This practical dish became the standard for church suppers, family reunions, and any gathering where folks needed to feed a crowd without breaking the budget. Contemporary press in the mid-1890s noted that Chicken Bog has become as essential to proper Southern entertaining as sweet tea and hospitality, after plantation cookbooks sparked widespread interest. Today, you'll pay about $18 to $25 for this same low-country comfort at authentic South Carolina restaurants, but back then, it was very affordable and could feed 12 people while using just 1 chicken and 2 cups of rice. That creamy, chicken-rich flavor paired with smoky sausage created the kind of satisfaction that made ordinary suppers feel like celebrations, while proving that rice could be so much more than a simple side dish. Our journey takes an elegant turn with New York's contribution. Waldorf Salad. Could something as simple as apples and mayonnaise really capture the sophistication of America's most elegant hotel? Picture the grand dining room of New York's Waldorf Hotel in 1896, where creative chefs faced the challenge of creating something refined yet approachable, elegant yet satisfying enough for America's most demanding palates. This wasn't just salad. This was innovation disguised as simplicity, proving that the finest dishes often spring from the most unexpected combinations. Crisp apples, celery, walnuts, mayonnaise, and just enough lemon juice to keep everything bright and fresh while creating textures that danced together in perfect harmony. You'd dice those apples and celery into uniform pieces, fold in chopped walnuts for crunch, then bind everything with mayonnaise until each component was coated but not drowning in dressing. Its trick was in the balance: sweet apples against savory celery, soft mayonnaise against crunchy walnuts, creating a symphony of textures and flavors that satisfied without overwhelming refined palates. This simple combination became so popular that restaurants nationwide began offering their own interpretations within months of its debut. Contemporary press in the late 1890s proclaimed that American chefs had created something entirely American, yet sophisticated enough for international acclaim, after European visitors began requesting recipes for their own establishments. Today, you'll spend about $12 to $20 for this same elegant simplicity at upscale establishments, but back then it was under $1 and represented the height of modern American cuisine. That perfect balance of sweet, savory, and creamy flavors created satisfaction that proved American cooking could compete with any European tradition while maintaining its own distinctive character. Back to New England, the ocean was providing inspiration again. Clam cakes. What transforms humble bivalves into golden spheres of coastal perfection? Step onto the weathered docks of Newport, Rhode Island in 1920, where Portuguese fishermen shared secrets that turned their daily catch into something that could satisfy both hunger and homesickness for the old country. These weren't just fritters, they were edible memories that connected new Americans to ancestral flavors while celebrating their adopted homeland's abundant waters. Fresh clams, flour, eggs, milk, baking powder, onions, salt, a pinch of pepper and paprika, seasoning varies by cook, creating combinations that honored the sea's generous provisions. You'd chop those clams fine enough to distribute evenly throughout the batter, mix everything until just combined to avoid tough results, then drop spoonfuls into bubbling oil, where they'd transform into crispy golden perfection. Kentucky chocolate walnut pie. What happens when bourbon meets chocolate in a pastry shell designed for celebration? Enter Louisville's Melrose Inn, circa 1950, where creative families discovered something that would become as synonymous with Kentucky as horses and bluegrass music itself. On paper, it's dessert. In practice, it's liquid courage transformed into something you could slice and serve, proving that the best traditions often spring from moments of inspired creativity. Chocolate chips, walnuts, eggs, butter, flour, corn syrup, vanilla, bourbon, and a pastry shell, sturdy enough to contain all that rich, boozy goodness without surrendering to the weight of Kentucky's finest ingredients. Baked bean sandwiches. Who would believe that necessity could create comfort between two slices of bread? Picture a 1932 Maine lumber camp where resourceful cooks discovered that leftover Saturday night beans could become Sunday morning magic when treated with creativity and respect for ingredients that shouldn't go to waste. These weren't just sandwiches. They were testament to Yankee thrift and the ability to find satisfaction in simplicity when times demanded innovation over abundance. Mulligan Stew. What do you cook when you have nothing but hope and whatever strangers might contribute? Journey to a 1930s hobo camp along the railroad tracks outside Chicago, where resourceful souls discovered that community could create miracles when everyone contributed whatever they could spare to a common pot. On paper, it's survival. In practice, it's democracy disguised as dinner, proving that sharing multiplies blessings even when those blessings seem impossibly small. Whatever anyone could contribute, a potato, an onion, a can of tomatoes, scraps of meat, day-old bread, vegetables past their prime, all combined with water and seasoning to create something greater than the sum of its humble parts. You'd build a fire from scrap wood, set up the communal pot, then wait as contributors arrived throughout the day, each adding something to improve the collective meal that would feed dozens of hungry travelers. Heat did the rest through hours of slow cooking when individual contributions merged into a thick, satisfying stew that proved abundance could emerge from apparent scarcity when hearts and hands worked together. This practical solution to hunger became a symbol of American resilience, showing how communities could care for their most vulnerable members through shared resources and genuine compassion. Contemporary press in the mid-1930s wrote that these remarkable communal meals have become monuments to human dignity in our darkest hours after witnessing how organized camps fed hundreds with dignity and respect. Scrapple. What happens when thrift meets creativity in the butcher shop? On paper, it's using leftovers. In practice, it's alchemy that transformed scraps into something that became a regional treasure worth defending against all critics. You'd boil those scraps until the meat fell away from bones, strain the rich broth, then slowly whisk in cornmeal while the mixture thickened into something that could be poured into loaf pans to set overnight. The turn comes here. What started as humble beginnings became something that sliced clean, fried up crispy, and provided protein-rich satisfaction that sustained farming families through demanding physical labor. It honored the hog. Scraps became breakfast. Waste became unthinkable. But Scrapple tells a deeper story about respect. Respect for the animal that gave its life, respect for the work that put food on the table, respect for the wisdom that understood nothing useful should ever be discarded. In Pennsylvania, Dutch kitchens, making Scrapple was almost ceremonial. The careful attention to seasoning, the patient stirring as cornmeal absorbed the rich broth, the overnight setting that transformed liquid into something substantial enough to slice and fry. Children learned early that Scrapple represented more than breakfast. It represented values. The understanding that abundance comes not from having more, but from using everything well. That the finest flavors often emerge from the humblest beginnings when treated with skill and respect. The morning ritual of slicing and frying Scrapple connected families to generations of farmers who understood that survival depended on creativity, that comfort could be cooked from seemingly unpromising ingredients when necessity guided willing hands. Contemporary press in the mid-1890s noted that Scrapple has become as essential to proper Pennsylvania breakfast as coffee and newspaper, after farmers' market surveys revealed its overwhelming popularity among working families. Today, you'll pay about $10 to $15 for this same Pennsylvania comfort at authentic German-American restaurants. But back then, it was very affordable and could provide breakfasts for 2 weeks. That crispy, savory exterior giving way to creamy, well-seasoned interior created satisfaction that honored both animal and tradition while proving that waste was simply opportunity waiting for the right cook to recognize its potential. Every bite carried the taste of thrift, transformed into triumph, of ingredients that might have been discarded instead, becoming the foundation for memories that lasted lifetimes. Cheese buttons. What transforms simple farmer cheese into pillowy clouds of prairie comfort? Picture a 1920s North Dakota farmhouse where German-Russian immigrants created something that reminded them of homeland flavors while celebrating their adopted country's abundant grain harvests. These weren't just dumplings. They were edible hugs that connected families to traditions while adapting to available ingredients and American abundance. Farmer cheese, eggs, flour, salt, pepper, butter, and just enough milk to create dough that could be shaped into little buttons that floated like hope itself in bubbling salted water. You'd mix that fresh cheese with eggs and flour until the mixture held together, form small dumplings between your palms, then drop them into gently boiling water where they'd puff up and signal their readiness by floating to the surface. Its trick was in the cheese. Fresh farmer cheese provided tangy richness while maintaining enough structure to hold the dumplings together through cooking without becoming heavy or dense. These simple dumplings could transform leftover cheese into a complete meal when served with butter, sour cream, or simple gravy made from pan drippings and flour. But cheese buttons carried more than sustenance. They carried memory. Each family shaped them slightly differently, some round as coins, others oval like tiny pillows. The technique passed from grandmother to granddaughter, hands guiding hands in the ancient dance of dough-making that connected prairie kitchens to old-world hearths. Winter evenings brought cheese button suppers that warmed both body and spirit. Steam rising from bowls, butter melting into golden pools, the satisfied sighs of family gathered around tables that groaned not with abundance, but with gratitude for what they had. These weren't meals to impress guests. These were meals to sustain souls through the long, cold months when the prairie wind reminded everyone how far they were from anywhere else. The preparation itself became meditation, rolling cheese and flour between palms until perfect spheres emerged, watching water bubble with anticipation, that magical moment when dumplings rose to the surface like answered prayers. Children learned patience waiting for cheese buttons to cook, understanding that good things took time, that some pleasures couldn't be rushed. Prairie families discovered that cheese buttons could stretch scarce ingredients into satisfaction that reminded everyone why they chose farming life over city convenience. Today, you'll spend about $12 to $20 for similar cheese dumplings at authentic German-Russian restaurants, but back then they were very affordable and could feed 6 people while using cheese that might otherwise spoil during summer heat. That tender, tangy flavor paired with buttery richness created comfort that sustained families through prairie winters while honoring traditions that connected them to ancestral wisdom and community heritage. In every bite lived the echo of homeland recipes adapted to new circumstances, the taste of traditions that bent without breaking, that found ways to flourish even in the harshest conditions. Fry bread tacos. What happens when traditional survival food meets modern innovation in a celebration of resilience? Journey to a 1950s reservation in South Dakota where Native American families transformed bread, born from hardship, into something that honored both struggle and strength while creating new traditions for future generations. Born from rations and displacement, fry bread carries a complicated history. Many communities celebrate it while honoring those origins. Flour, baking powder, salt, lard or oil, water, and whatever taco fillings families could gather. Ground beef, beans, lettuce, tomatoes, cheese, creating combinations that satisfied both hunger and the human need for foods that tell stories. You'd mix that simple dough until smooth, let it rest while oil heated to shimmering perfection, then stretch each portion thin before dropping it into hot fat where it would puff and bubble into golden, crispy clouds. Heat did the rest in those moments when flour and water transformed into something that could hold any filling while providing the kind of satisfying crunch and tender interior that made every bite a small celebration. These resourceful cooks created something that honored difficult history while building bridges to contemporary life, proving that food could carry both memory and hope in equal measure. But fry bread tacos represent something profound about resilience, the ability to take ingredients born from displacement and create something that brings joy. Each piece of dough stretched between knowing hands carried stories of adaptation, of communities that refused to let circumstances define their spirit, of traditions that found ways to celebrate even in the face of loss. The sizzle of dough hitting hot oil became the sound of survival, transformed into sustenance. Watching bread puff and bubble became meditation on resilience, on the remarkable ability of people to create beauty and nourishment from whatever life provides. The golden color that emerged from simple flour and water reminded everyone that transformation is always possible, that endings can become beginnings when approached with courage and creativity. Community gatherings centered around fry bread became celebrations of identity, of traditions that refused to disappear, of foods that carried both pain and pride in equal measure. Children learned to stretch dough and judge oil temperature, understanding that they were inheriting more than recipes. They were inheriting responsibility for keeping culture alive through the simple act of cooking with love and intention. Contemporary press in the late 1950s wrote that fry bread has become a symbol of survival transformed into celebration, after powwow demonstrations introduced thousands to this remarkable adaptation. Today you'll pay about $12 to $18 for authentic fry bread tacos at Native American cultural centers and festivals. But back then they cost whatever families could afford and represented the ability to create joy from ingredients provided by government commodities. That crispy, slightly sweet bread, paired with savory fillings, created satisfaction that fed both body and spirit while proving that the most resilient traditions adapt without losing their essential character or meaning. Every bite honored the journey from hardship to healing, from rations to recipes that reminded everyone that survival itself can be a form of celebration when approached with dignity and determination. Burgoo, how do you create abundance when everyone brings a little something to share? Return to a 1930s Kentucky churchyard where community cooking reached its ultimate expression. Hundreds of people, dozens of ingredients, and one massive pot that could feed an entire county while bringing neighbors together through shared labor and abundant results. On paper, it's cooking. In practice, it's democracy in action, proving that when communities unite around common purpose, miracles emerge from the simplest acts of generosity and cooperation. Beef, pork, chicken, lamb, if available, corn, lima beans, okra, tomatoes, onions, potatoes, and whatever vegetables generous souls contributed from their gardens to create something greater than anyone could achieve alone. You'd start this monumental undertaking before dawn, building fires under enormous iron kettles, browning pounds of meat, while volunteers chopped vegetables and shared stories that seasoned everything better than any spice. Heat did the rest over 12 hours of patient stirring when individual contributions merged into thick, rich stew that satisfied both hunger and the human need for community connection that sustained souls through difficult times. What makes it sing is how this tradition created abundance from apparent scarcity while building relationships that lasted far longer than any meal could satisfy. Contemporary press in the early 1930s proclaimed that Burgoo cooking has become Kentucky's greatest expression of community spirit, after witnessing church fundraisers that fed over 800 people and raised enough money to keep local schools operating through the Depression. Today you'll pay about $20 to $25 for a bowl of this same community comfort at authentic Kentucky restaurants. But back then, it cost whatever neighbors could contribute and created bonds that proved sharing multiplies blessings rather than dividing them. That rich, complex flavor developed through communal cooking and countless contributions created satisfaction that fed both body and spirit while establishing traditions that reminded everyone that no challenge is too great when communities face it together. Cincinnati Chili. What happens when Mediterranean spices meet American ground beef in unexpected harmony? Journey to 1922. Cincinnati, where early chili parlors run by Macedonian immigrants layered warm spices over spaghetti and cheese. On paper, it's chili. In practice, it's cultural fusion that proved American cooking could embrace the world while creating something entirely its own. Ground beef, onions, tomato sauce, beef broth, chili powder, cinnamon, allspice, cocoa powder, and secret spices that transformed ordinary meat sauce into liquid comfort with mysterious depth. You'd brown that beef with onions until fragrant, add spices that seemed impossible together, then simmer for hours until flavors married into something that defied explanation but demanded devotion. Its trick was in the unexpected. Cinnamon and chocolate in chili seemed wrong until that first taste proved that innovation often requires abandoning preconceptions about what belongs together. The turn comes here when served over spaghetti with mounds of shredded cheese, creating five-way combinations that became as essential to Cincinnati as the Ohio River itself. Contemporary press in the mid-1920s declared that this peculiar chili has become our city's most distinctive contribution to American cuisine, after local parlors began opening throughout the city. Today, you'll pay about $10 to $15 for this same Cincinnati comfort at authentic chili parlors, but back then it was very affordable and provided the kind of warming satisfaction that made cold Ohio winters bearable. That sweet, spicy complexity paired with tender pasta created flavors that seemed impossible, yet became absolutely essential to anyone who grew up understanding that real chili comes with spaghetti underneath. Cowboy beans. How do you feed a dozen hungry cowboys with just beans and whatever the trail provided? Picture a 1880s cattle drive camp somewhere in Texas where resourceful chuck wagon cooks discovered that patience and creativity could transform humble legumes into something that sustained hard-working men through months of demanding outdoor labor. These weren't just beans. They were fuel disguised as comfort food, proving that the simplest ingredients could produce extraordinary satisfaction when treated with respect and cooked with wisdom earned through necessity. Pinto beans, salt pork or bacon, onions, molasses, or brown sugar, coffee or Chile when available. And whatever leftover meat scraps could be salvaged from previous meals to add richness and substance. You'd soak those beans overnight while coyotes sang in the distance, then slow cook them in a Dutch oven buried in coals until they achieved that perfect balance of tender and substantial that could satisfy the biggest appetites. Its trick was in the timing. Beans cooked too fast turned to mush, while patient cooking developed creamy interiors while maintaining enough structure to hold together during long, slow simmering that concentrated flavors. One pot of these hearty beans could feed an entire crew for 2 days while providing the kind of stick-to-your-ribs satisfaction that powered men through 16-hour days in the saddle. Contemporary press in the mid-1880s reported that a good pot of cowboy beans can sustain a man through anything the trail might offer after interviewing dozens of experienced drovers. Today, you'll spend about $12 to $20 for similar ranch-style beans at authentic barbecue joints, but back then they were very affordable and represented the difference between energy and exhaustion on long cattle drives. That smoky, sweet, savory flavor paired with tender texture created satisfaction that reminded cowboys why good food could make even the hardest work bearable, while proving that beans deserved respect as serious sustenance rather than humble side dishes. Cornbread dressing. What transforms leftover cornbread into the centerpiece of holiday memories? Step into a 1920s Georgia farmhouse kitchen where resourceful cooks discovered that yesterday's bread could become today's treasure when combined with wisdom passed down through generations of Southern families. On paper, it's using leftovers. In practice, it's alchemy that honored both frugality and tradition while creating something that became as essential to proper holiday tables as turkey and gratitude itself. Crumbled cornbread, day-old biscuits, celery, onions, sage, poultry seasoning, chicken broth, eggs, and enough love to bind together ingredients that might otherwise be forgotten into something worthy of the finest celebrations. You'd crumble that cornbread and biscuits into coarse pieces, saute vegetables until fragrant, then combine everything with warm broth until the mixture achieved that perfect consistency between stuffing and pudding. What makes it sing is the cornbread base. Its slightly sweet, crumbly texture absorbed flavors while maintaining enough structure to slice clean yet remain moist and satisfying on the fork. This practical solution to leftover bread became so essential that families would bake cornbread specifically for dressing, elevating humble beginnings into holiday tradition. But cornbread dressing carries deeper magic than mere sustenance. It's the dish that transforms a house into a home during the holidays. The aroma that calls wandering children back to the kitchen, that signals celebration even when times are lean. Salmon Patties. What happens when canned fish meets creative necessity in Depression-era kitchens? Journey to a 1930s Pacific Northwest cannery town where families discovered that affordable salmon could be transformed into something that satisfied both budget and appetite when fresh fish remained beyond reach. These weren't just using what you could afford. These were proof that dignity could be maintained even when circumstances demanded creativity over abundance. Canned salmon, eggs, breadcrumbs, onions, salt, pepper, and just enough oil for frying into golden patties that proved simple ingredients could produce complex satisfaction when treated with care and respect. You'd drain that salmon carefully to save every precious flake, mix it with beaten eggs and breadcrumbs until the mixture held together, then form patties that fried up crispy outside while remaining tender and flaky within. Its trick was in the handling. Gentle mixing preserved the salmon's natural texture while creating patties substantial enough to satisfy without becoming dense or heavy on the stomach. These resourceful families created something that stretched expensive protein while providing the kind of satisfying meal that reminded everyone that good food didn't require fancy ingredients or unlimited budgets. But salmon patties represent something profound about grace under pressure. They're the dish that appeared on tables when paychecks fell short, when fresh fish was a luxury, when families had to choose between pride and practicality. Yet somehow these simple patties never felt like compromise. They felt like comfort. Children learned to pick through canned salmon with careful fingers, removing tiny bones while preserving every precious flake. This wasn't just meal preparation. This was education in resourcefulness, in the understanding that abundance isn't about having more, but about making the most of what you have. Milk toast. Who would believe that something so simple could provide such profound comfort? Picture a 1940s sick room where gentle mothers discovered that the most basic ingredients could create exactly what recovering bodies and weary souls needed most. On paper, it's invalid food. In practice, it's tenderness disguised as sustenance, proving that sometimes the simplest gestures carry the deepest love and most healing power. Thick slices of bread, warm milk, butter, salt, and just enough patience to create something that nourished both body and spirit when nothing else seemed possible to keep down or appreciate. You'd toast that bread until golden but not crispy, place it in a warm bowl, then pour hot milk seasoned with salt and butter over everything until it achieved that perfect consistency between soup and pudding. What makes it sing is the temperature. Warm milk transformed ordinary toast into something that felt like a gentle embrace from the inside, providing comfort that went far beyond simple nutrition. This humble combination could soothe upset stomachs, comfort sick children, and provide gentle nourishment when regular food seemed too challenging or overwhelming to manage. But milk toast carries medicine that no pharmacy can provide. It's the dish that appeared during fevered nights when worried mothers sat vigil beside restless children. The soft clink of spoon against bowl became lullaby. The gentle steam rising from warm milk became prayer made visible. Chicken a la king. What transforms leftover chicken into something elegant enough for company? Step into a 1920s hotel dining room where creative chefs discovered that yesterday's roast could become today's sophistication when treated with cream sauce and presented with style that elevated humble beginnings into something worthy of America's finest establishments. On paper, it's using leftovers. In practice, it's culinary democracy that proved good food didn't require expensive ingredients when skill and creativity guided the process. Cooked chicken, mushrooms, peas, pimientos, butter, flour, cream, sherry if available, and enough seasoning to transform simple ingredients into something that tasted like luxury even when budgets demanded economy. You'd make a rich cream sauce by cooking flour in butter until smooth, gradually adding cream until silky, then folding in chicken and vegetables until everything was coated in velvet richness. Its trick was in the presentation, served over toast points, biscuits, or puff pastry shells. This humble chicken mixture became elegant enough for the most demanding dinner guests. This dish made small amounts of chicken feed large groups while creating the kind of sophisticated flavors that impressed everyone who tasted it. But Chicken a la King tells a deeper story about aspiration. This was the dish that let working families taste elegance, that brought hotel sophistication to kitchen tables where every penny mattered. It was democracy disguised as dinner, proving that luxury wasn't about expensive ingredients, but about the skill to transform simple things into something extraordinary. Picture Sunday dinners across America where this creamy mixture appeared in the good china, served with the ceremony usually reserved for far more expensive fare. Children learned to appreciate sophisticated flavors, while mothers learned that presentation could transform perception. The careful arrangement over pastry shells, the artistic scatter of bright pimientos, the way cream sauce pooled perfectly around each serving, these weren't just cooking techniques, they were lessons in dignity. The preparation itself became a form of alchemy, watching flour and butter transform into roux, seeing cream slowly incorporated until the mixture achieved that perfect silky consistency, folding in chicken with the reverence usually reserved for precious ingredients. This wasn't just using leftovers, this was elevating them to art. Hotel chefs who created this dish understood something profound about American dining. People craved sophistication they could afford. They yearned for flavors that reminded them that elegance wasn't the exclusive domain of the wealthy. Chicken a la King delivered that promise, one creamy spoonful at a time. The beauty lay in its flexibility. Leftover turkey worked just as well as chicken. Frozen peas when fresh ones were beyond reach. Canned mushrooms when fresh ones seemed extravagant. Each family adapted the recipe to their circumstances while maintaining its essential elegance, proving that sophistication was less about ingredients than about intention. Kitchen tables across the country witnessed Chicken a la King suppers that made ordinary evenings feel special. The ritual of serving, the satisfied murmurs of approval, the understanding that this meal bridged the gap between everyday necessity and special occasion luxury. These weren't just dinners. They were moments when families tasted possibility. The sauce itself became a symbol of transformation. That moment when flour and butter and cream merged into something greater than their individual parts, when humble chicken became the star of an elegant presentation. It was cooking as philosophy, the understanding that potential lies hidden in the most unexpected places. Contemporary press in the early 1920s proclaimed that Chicken a la King has democratized fine dining by bringing hotel elegance to family tables after witnessing its rapid adoption in homes across the country. Today, you'll pay about $20 to $30 for this same comfort elegance at traditional American restaurants, but back then it was under $1 and could feed 6 people while using 2 cups of leftover chicken. That rich, creamy flavor, studded with colorful vegetables, created satisfaction that proved simple ingredients could produce extraordinary results when treated with respect and presented with pride while transforming ordinary suppers into occasions worth remembering and celebrating together. Apple Pandowdy. What happens when apple pie meets New England thrift in perfect harmony? Journey to a 1800s Vermont farmhouse where resourceful cooks discovered that perfect fruit deserved respect even when pastry skills remained imperfect or time didn't allow for elaborate presentations. On paper, it's making do. In practice, it's honest cooking that honored ingredients while creating something that satisfied both sweet tooth and practical necessity. Sliced apples, brown, sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, molasses, and a simple pastry crust that didn't need to be pretty to be perfect for containing autumn's sweetest treasures. You'd layer those seasoned apples in a buttered baking dish, Cover with rough pastry pieces, then bake until the top turned golden and the bottom bubbled with concentrated apple essence. Halfway through, you dowdy the crust. Break it so it drinks the apple syrup. This humble dessert created satisfaction that rivaled the fanciest pies while using less butter, fewer eggs, and requiring none of the precision that intimidated home bakers. Contemporary press in the late 1880s wrote that Apple Pandowdy has become Vermont's answer to fancy city desserts after county fair baking contests revealed its overwhelming popularity among both judges and fairgoers. Today, you'll spend about $10 to $15 for this same rustic comfort at farm-to-table restaurants celebrating New England traditions, but back then it was very affordable and used apples that might otherwise spoil before proper pie-making became possible. That concentrated apple flavor, paired with imperfect but delicious crust, created satisfaction that proved the best desserts often emerge from honest ingredients treated with respect rather than elaborate techniques designed more to impress than to nourish and comfort hungry families. Johnny Cakes. What sustained New England families when wheat failed and corn became salvation? Travel back to 1650s Rhode Island, where Native American wisdom met colonial necessity, creating something that would nourish generations of Americans through feast and famine alike. These weren't just cornmeal pancakes. They were edible bridges between cultures that proved the best traditions often emerge when different peoples share knowledge and ingredients with generous hearts. Cornmeal, water, salt, and nothing else except the patience to understand that simple ingredients could produce extraordinary satisfaction when treated with respect and cooked with wisdom, earned through generations of practice. You'd mix that cornmeal with boiling water until it formed a thick mush, let it cool enough to handle, then form flat cakes that cooked on a hot griddle until crispy outside and creamy within. Its trick was in the cornmeal itself. Stone-ground white corn produced different flavors and textures than yellow, while the cooking technique determined whether you achieved crispy edges or tender centers. These simple cakes proved they could sustain families through entire winters when wheat crops failed and imported flour remained beyond reach or too expensive for ordinary families. Colonial records from the late 1600s noted that journey cakes have become as essential to proper Rhode Island tables as clam chowder and religious freedom after witnessing their adoption throughout New England communities. Today, you'll find authentic versions of these same colonial treasures at historic taverns and heritage festivals for $8 to $12. But back then, they cost virtually nothing and represented the difference between survival and starvation during harvest failures. That crispy, corn-sweet flavor, paired with satisfying density, created energy that powered colonists through demanding work, while honoring both Native American agricultural wisdom and the adaptability that would define American cooking for centuries to come. The thread that connects all 30 of these remarkable dishes isn't just their inclusion in Betty Crocker's comprehensive collection. It's their ability to transform simple ingredients into something greater through the application of love, necessity, and the kind of kitchen wisdom that passes from generation to generation like precious family heirlooms. Whether born from abundance or scarcity, celebration or survival, each recipe represents the remarkable ability of American families to create comfort, community, and connection through the simple act of preparing food with care and sharing it with generous hearts. These weren't just recipes collected in a cookbook. They were lifelines disguised as lunch, survival strategies dressed up as Sunday dinner, and community builders masquerading as simple comfort food. They remind us that the most meaningful meals often emerge from the most challenging circumstances and that the greatest abundance often springs from the simplest acts of sharing what we have with those we love. In kitchens from Maine to California, from the Great Depression through wartime rationing and beyond, these dishes sustained families, built communities, and created the kind of food memories that last lifetimes, while proving that the finest cuisine often emerges not from fancy ingredients, but from generous hearts and creative spirits willing to transform necessity into nourishment and scarcity into satisfaction. What stories do your family's favorite dishes tell about resilience, adaptation, and the remarkable ability to create abundance from whatever life provides? Share your own regional treasures in the comments below.